All right, my name is Chris Furry, and I'm here with Graham McGowan, and we are once again coming to you straight out of left field. What's up, man?
Another day, brother. Keeping it locked down over here. It's been a rough week, obviously, in Florida for us. Don't need to get into all the crazy news stories. I don't know. Have you heard a lot while you've been out of the country?
Yeah, so obviously I heard about the attacks in the nightclub in Florida.
Yeah.
And it was big news here, actually, as I've been told that all mass shootings in the United States are, and mostly just people shaking their heads and trying to figure out, you know, how we continue to do this to ourselves.
Yeah, it's been a rough one.
Then, I mean, not even 2 days later, you got another guy going off and killing a couple other folks, and then a couple days after that, some kid gets drugged into a pond by an alligator.
Yeah, it was the first one was, I guess, a singer was on The Voice, and a deranged fan attacked her. Then we had the shooting, and then, yeah, I think it was that night or the night after, we had the kid with the alligator thing. So, yeah, it's just been a rough one. I say things come in threes, and, man, it definitely hit us. But, man, I got to tell you, I was pretty happy to be in Florida. I woke up so late, I didn't even know what was going on until almost noon. But, I mean, they actually turned people away from donating blood because the lines were so long. They filled up and couldn't use everybody.
Yeah, there were thousands of people.
Yeah, and something that didn't get a lot of press, and I'm not going to get in on the religious side of things. This is not what this show's about. But one of the local Chick-fil-A's opened their doors on Sunday, which they never do, and made a bunch of tea and sandwiches and took it down to people at the blood banks and some of the first responders who were unable to leave their posts to give them food and things to drink to, just to kind of help with whatever they could do. So, I mean, definitely a huge response from the community, which was pretty cool.
Was it property?
Exactly.
Here in well, I'm in Italy now. We promised you an on-the-road show, and an on-the-road show you shall get. But here in England, when I was in England, which is where I reside for most of the week, there was a huge outpouring, and people were really shocked and outraged by what happened in Orlando. And then just a couple of days later, it happened there. A member of parliament was gunned down in the street.
That's right.
By an angry person, and they're still sorting through their feelings on that, because that's not something that happens in Britain. It's
right.
It's so uncommon that people were shocked and terrified.
Yep. Even the police there, I think, don't carry firearms, if I remember correctly.
Oh no, they all do. They all do.
They do.
And
they
actually,
do now. Okay.
most public places have army also that also have
okay.
Automatic weapons. And here in Italy, also in France. If you go to any of the major public tourist attractions here in Italy or in France, most disjointedly at the Louvre Museum, you'll see regular army with full gear and automatic rifles, and they're there to prevent these sort of things.
Right. Well, I will say, to kind of slowly transition us into the show, something kind of cool that happened. The Tampa Bay Rays played the San Francisco Giants for a weekend series this week, and I'm actually heading out to see that game, the Saturday game, today after we finish the show. And they dedicated their Pride Night, which I think is kind of cool, because I don't suspect that the Giants or people in San Francisco take that as an insult that Pride Night is dedicated on night when the Giants play, because San Francisco is such a big, city in that, for that kind of, for that community. But all leftover seats for the Rays Giants game on Friday were sold for $5, and it was a sellout crowd. And all the additional proceeds went to one of the Orlando funds. They're sitting on almost $8 million that's been raised in just the last week. So, really cool to see that. The Rays wore the old Orlando Rays, the AA cap they used to play at Tinker Field. They wore those caps for the game. I'm hoping they're going to auction them off. I think it'd be really cool. So, pretty neat. So,
that's good.
But
man. I'm glad that they did something.
Yeah. So let's go full-blown baseball battle. I know you were stationed at Fort Lewis, so right near Seattle. So
right.
I know we talked. One of the things you did a decent amount was go watch Mariners games. And obviously the staple for that team for a long time was none other than Ichiro Suzuki. Ichiro, he started playing for the Mariners in 2001. Now, Brandon, he played 9 seasons in Japan. So, I mean, when he won Rookie of the Year, it kind of bothered me, I'm not going to lie, because he was no rookie. He'd been playing for quite a while. He was just new to the majors. But he had 1,278 hits in Japan. Now, his rookie year in 2001 for Major Leagues, he had 242 hits. From 2001 to 2010, he had over 200 hits in every season. The crazy thing to me is 2015 was his age 41 season. That was the first season since his sophomore season in Japan. Okay, so that was 93, was his second year playing professional baseball, that he had less than 100 hits on a season. So
I think one of the things that is really great about Ichiro is his ability to get on base. And a lot of those hits, in fact, the vast majority of those hits are singles. But it gets him on base. He's a great leadoff guy. He's sitting right now in the major leagues. He's sitting at 2,980 hits, but was double digits in doubles perennially. Every year he would get into the 20s or 30s. He did 20 or 30 doubles. But only once did he ever get double digit in triples, which I know is difficult. But also only twice or 3 times did he ever get double digits in home runs. So he's a contact hitter, which is good. I mean, it's great for a leadoff guy. He's a great hitter. Can't take that away from him. However, I think Major League Baseball is making a mistake with Ichiro right now. In that,
you're talking about the hit record, aren't you? Which obviously is probably the main reason we're bringing it up. 3 days ago, June 15th, Ichiro doubles off of Fernando Rodney for his career 4,257th hit, and that passes Pete Rose's major league record of 4,256. I heard a story off of the point you just made that I thought was really funny. Lou Piniella, I mean, one of the probably most infamous managers of at least the last 20 or 30 years. I think, I don't think either of us was around when Earl Weaver was in his prime. But they said that Ichiro, when he had come over within the first couple of years, and his English was better than he let on, but he was sitting in the cage, and he was just smacking slices to left field. Just slice the ball. And Piniella looked at him and asked him in Lou Piniella fashion, with words that I will not say on this podcast for any of our young listeners, for lack of a better term, can't you just pull the ball? Can you just pull the ball into right field just a little, please? Is that possible? And I said Ichiro at that point hit 5 home runs in a row over the right field wall. He had pop. I mean, but his ability, and I think he's one of the best we've seen because he hits the ball a lot like a softball player. His ability to really control where the ball goes is something that a lot of guys in the bigs need to emulate and learn. He will be a great hitting coach in the major leagues if teams are willing to hire him, depending on how good of his English is, how good he is with players. Because as much as we see a pull being the issue now, in the shift, you can't shift him. If you shift Ichiro, he'll burn you. You have to play him straight up. at best, you can shift him in the outfield. Maybe try and close the gaps. You play some you can play in a little bit more because you're not playing as much of the no doubles defense. But you can't shift him. And if he can go to a team that's already strong, and I swear, if you say the Giants, we're done. But if he can go to a team that's already strong, and then he can go ahead and help fix those hitters who are just those consistent pullers and make them a more full field hitter, dude. I mean, rarely do we say that a bench coach is the key to a team, but he could be a huge piece on getting a team over that hump and putting them in that top 1 or 2 tier spots for, making a consistent push into postseason and maybe the World Series.
And I won't disagree with you on that. Pretty much everything you said is spot on as far as analysis goes. But that's not why we're discussing Ichiro Suzuki right now. We're discussing Ichiro Suzuki because Major League Baseball has basically allowed him to accept the mantle of hits leader with 2,980 hits. Now, not officially. He is not the official Major League Baseball leader in hits. But he's got 2,980 hits. He does not have 4,257.
No.
And I think it's very clear because there's a lot of media right now surrounding this quote-unquote broken record. Ichiro Suzuki has 16 years in the major leagues.
Mm-hmm.
And he has, 14? 15?
Played 9 seasons in Japan starting in 1992. Came to the Mariners in 2001.
So he has 9 seasons in Japan. He has 16 in the major leagues. That's 25 seasons, 25 years he's played baseball total. Pete Rose played 24 seasons in the major leagues. If Ichiro Suzuki plays 24 seasons in the major leagues and he hits 4,257 major league hits, then I will secede that he is the major league hit record holder. But there's been a lot of media surrounding this quote-unquote broken record that is not a broken record. If anything, it needs to be addressed that his hit record for the major leagues should not be added to the baseball record, to the record, because let's face it, when guys leave the major leagues and go to Japan to play baseball, which is, we had this discussion the other day, the Japanese league is good, but in my opinion, it's between AAA and Major League Ball. It's not quite actually, Major League Ball.
Buster Olney said that from what he has seen and the scouts he's talked to, they compare it to right between AA and AAA. They say, very few guys are touching Major League stuff, which is why we don't see a ton of them. But the ones that do normally come over here. But they say, yeah, it's close to that AA cusp of being made to AAA player that you see on a consistent basis over there.
And we have guys that leave Major League Baseball and they go play Japanese baseball. Guys like Kevin Mitchell, who leave the majors for whatever reason. Maybe they can't find a contract. Maybe they're getting a little old. Maybe they're hurt. Maybe they don't want to play in the United States anymore. For whatever reason, they leave and they go to Japan and they play ball. But I guarantee you that the Japanese Baseball League doesn't add their major league totals to their quote-unquote rookie year numbers in Japan, because they're not the same game.
Well,
and we shouldn't do the same for Suzuki, because it's not the same game. If you're going to call the guy a rookie and give him a Rookie of the Year award, then in 2001 he starts at zeros.
I agree, and I think because this isn't like the NBA, where the NBA Hall of Fame is all-encompassing. You have college players, international players, you have female players, NBA. It's an all-encompassing Hall of Fame. Cooperstown is just that, Major League Baseball. And I agree to your point. It doesn't directly correlate, but I will say this, and if you guys agree, disagree, tweet us at OOLeftField. You can email us, ooleftfield@gmail.com. I think if Ichiro had started his career in Major League Baseball or had come over maybe after 93, after his first 2 years playing in Japan, I think he would have legitimately passed that record. I think that the way that he hits, he can hit for power, but his standard way of hitting is hitting for average. He's a contact hitter, and he can place the ball. He gets on base, and he had wheels very early. I think he could have surpassed Pete Rose's career hit record. But no, it is an amazing feat because they play less games in Japan. His highest hit total in Japan was 210 in 1994. He played in 130 games. So, I mean, he amassed a large number of hits in fewer games, but to your point, if he is 20 hits away from what is, by most accounts, one of the most hallowed stats and records in Major League Baseball, which is 3,000 hits, he's 20 hits away from that in 16 seasons of playing. Obviously, the hit total he had in Japan is going to be elevated because he had that Major League Baseball pedigree when he was there. It just took him so long to get to the United States. And he really kind of broke that down when he came. That's when we started seeing guys like, Godzilla coming over with Matsui in New York, and then Daisuke Matsuzaka came over to Boston. So, it really started that trend of guys coming. But I agree with you. You can't take 1,300 almost hits and add that to Major League Baseball. It's great for Japan, and it's awesome to say, you know what? In fact, he has more career hits than Pete Rose had, and that is an amazing stat. But he does not have the Major League Baseball hit record because all of those hits didn't come in the bigs. I think it's a great story. I respect the heck out of him, but I agree with you. You can't.
I don't know that I agree with that statement, though. Because if we're going to add his Japanese hits to his career hit record, then we got to add Pete Rose's time in the minor leagues if there was any. And when you do that, now how far back are we going to go? We're going to go back to Little League? I'm pretty sure Pete Rose is hitting the ball in Little League. I mean,
you sound like Pete Rose. He said we start counting his high school hits. So I don't know. Did you give Pete a call from Italy over there in Las Vegas while he's signing autographs?
Well, I have a soft spot in my heart for Pete Rose. I don't necessarily think that he's earned his way back into baseball yet, or at all. He broke a rule, and he broke a rule that he knew he shouldn't have broken, but that's all politics.
A cardinal sin.
Yeah, ask shoeless Joe Jackson. He knows.
Yeah, but like I said, I think we're on agreement. I'm in no way saying that he is a hit king. I'm just saying professionally, yes, I understand that we can compare Japan professional baseball to lower level Major League Baseball, but regardless, to have somebody have over 4,000 hits in a professional career is still pretty impressive. And I have no doubt he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think he will be. He's going to easily have more than 3,000 hits. He changed. I wish he had changed the way to a point hitters hit. I mean, guys aren't going to hit like he does, but I think that, like I said, he can end up being a bigger force of change if he's willing to go into coaching. I just don't know if he will.
Right. But
so,
on the bright side, whether Ichiro decides to coach or whether he's going to retire at the end of the season, he's not getting the at-bats that he used to. He's not getting the hits that he used to. Failed to break triple digits last year.
Yeah.
So whether or not Ichiro continues with his career and continues getting hits, I can always say for absolute certain that the Giants beat the Dodgers 2 out of 3 times last week, and that is a big deal.
How did I not know you were going to be the one to transition us into that topic? You know, I got to be honest, guys. I sat here all week telling you we were going to talk about it and then going, man, I really don't know if I want to do this whole international Giant thing, because I knew how you were going to react to it. And, again, guys, you can get us on Twitter, at OOLeftField on Twitter. We are on email as well. Shoot us an email, ooleftfield@gmail.com. And, yes, the Dodgers and Giants played a 3-game weekend series last year. They were in the middle of it, actually, at the time of our last show. And there is not a doubt in my mind this is going to be one of the best, if not likely the best race to watch down the stretch. I don't think the Nationals and the Mets are going to compare to the Dodgers-Giants, also because this is just a storied rivalry. And, you know, it's been a long time since we've seen these guys really going neck and neck. Normally one kind of pulls away, and, you know, we've seen the Giants a lot of times jump in the wild card. And I think we'll get into the wild card idea later on, you know, down the road for the show. Here's what I see. Both need bullpen help. That's the first thing. Starters on both sides are good. You lose Sergio Romo to injury again. He really has not been the same, you know, since that 2012 World Series where, you know, he struck out Miggy Cabrera to clinch it. I mean, that slider was devastating, and then he throws him a straight fastball in the inside corner, freezes him, and gets Brian O'Nora to ring him up. We haven't seen the same Sergio Romo, and the closing spot really has been the one that we've seen probably the most turnover in, because you had Brian Wilson in 2010, then Romo comes in. You know, it's kind of a constant flux for them for the guy who they want to have close out those games.
Well, Brian Wilson turns around and has Tommy John. Doesn't recover from it quite the way he was expected to. Get some shots in AAA ball, rehab shots, and just doesn't really come back the way we wanted him to. He gets dealt to the Dodgers, as a matter of fact. And Romo really stepped up in that 2012 World Series. He really did. But then we go into 2013, everything's kind of uncertain. We still have Santiago Casilla, who's a great closer. Plus we have Sergio Romo, who is a proven World Series winning closer. And so they do this thing where they just kind of close by committee. And they did that throughout the 2013 and 2014 seasons. They had this closer by committee idea. Didn't work out real well for him in 2013, though Santiago Casilla was getting most of the shots. In 2014, when they really went to this committee idea, basically just whoever was up and ready first, or whoever Boch decided he wanted to throw in, that's who was going to go. And they did really well. Obviously, they won the World Series again. But Santiago Casilla shut the World Series, not Sergio Romo. So there again, you have 3 World Series wins in 3 consecutive even years with 3 different closers. And it's getting a little tumultuous for them. I don't know where they're going. It hurts to lose Sergio Romo, especially since Santiago Casilla tends to blow saves more often than I would like to see from a really strong closer, or from a closer who's going to have 35 or 40 save opportunities possibly this season, the way that we've been winning these 1-2 run games.
Yeah, he has blown 4 this year. Actually, when they were playing Atlanta, I told you I was surprised that Atlanta was able to take I think they took 2 out of 4. He blew a save. That was his last blown save, was against Atlanta. But he has 14 saves this year. So, yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. His early ERA in June is not good. He's given up 4 runs in 6 1/3 innings pitched already. And
what it'll probably look like at the end of the season, going into the postseason, hopefully, is Santiago Casilla will have 29 or 30 saves, but he'll have 7 or 8 blown. And to me, that's too high of a ratio for a day in, day out closer. Yeah. I'd like to see somebody stronger on the mound closing games.
Yeah, you can't have a 4-to-1 save to blown save ratio as a closer for one of the top teams in baseball. I agree.
Right. Fortunately, that didn't really come into play. He did get the shot against the Dodgers in Game 3. The only time he was needed, that 2-1 win that we secured on the Brandon Belt 2-run shot.
Mm-hmm.
But he came out in Game 2, not in a save situation in a tie ball game.
Yep.
And
pitched a one-hit inning with a strikeout.
Inning.
Yep. And then came back the next day and got the save. You're right. On 2/3 of an inning, gave up 2 ground balls through 9 pitches. So, you're right. It was a solid outing for him, at least on those 2, which is you got to do a confidence building game, especially against your divisional rival. I thoroughly agree with you on that.
But what was interesting to see in that Game 2, which ended with Buster Posey's 3rd walk-off hit of his career, was to watch Johnny Cueto go up against Clayton Kershaw.
Mm-hmm. Now, that was Game 1.
I'm sorry, Game 1. You're right.
Yeah. Game 1 was the Cueto Kershaw, and then Game 2 was the walk-off.
Right. Sorry about that. But it was interesting to watch those 2 pitchers pitch against each other, which would typically have been, at least in the preference of Giants fans, would have been a Mad Bum start.
Right.
Unfortunately, Mad Bum had pitched the previous game, so Cueto gets the start, goes up against Clayton Kershaw, and interestingly gets called for a balk for doing basically the same thing that Kershaw does on every single windup. He does that little.
I was going to ask you if you had seen that the video of that balk.
Yes, and he does that little. I don't want to call it a pause. It definitely is a pause, and in Kershaw's case, it's almost a toe tap that I really, really hate. I hate that windup. I hate the way it looks. Every time I see Clayton Kershaw pitch, I just want to say balk, balk, balk.
I do. I actually do say that when I watch him in the stretch where he brings his hands down.
Right.
I have seen times where he doesn't pause. And guys, we'll explain the whole idea of a balk in a little bit, but yeah, I'm with you. Actually, if you don't mind, Chris, since we're kind of rolling into this, let me kind of just preface this real quick. For those of you guys that have seen a balk, or if you're like my dad and just don't understand what it is, basically a balk is a movement made by the pitcher to intentionally deceive the runner. Okay, so something, for example, where the pitcher has to come to what the rule book defines as a discernible stop. If he's bringing his hands from above his head down to his belt, middle of his stomach, whatever it may be, there has to be a discernible stop. He can't just change direction, or as we say, roll through his delivery. By doing that, it gives the runner a disadvantage on the break. It gives the pitcher a split second of extra time, which in the bigs could be a huge difference between an out and being called safe on a steal. The biggest, and that's the one you see most often on Kershaw. Now, he got called on one for stepping towards home plate, which as a lefty, you have that running lane, and you see that line that comes towards the fair foul line off of the running lane line. That's the 45-foot line where the pitcher has to step towards or inside the first base side of that line if he's going to throw to first, and has to step on the other side to go home. That's usually the call you see the first base umpire make. And there are multiple other balks, but those tend to be the ones that you see. Falling off, that, or usually we see guys falling off the mound. They get their cleat stuck, and they fall off the mound. They don't deliver the pitch. That's the same thing. A twitch of the hip happens every now and again, but mostly it's the stop.
And I'd like to point out that Johnny Cueto's stop was in the middle of a full windup.
Exactly.
Which annoys me because there was no runner to deceive.
Well, no, there were runners on second and third. Utley actually scored. He was on third. There was, but Here is my argument to that point, and I'm with you on this. If you're in the windup, Chris, you pitched, what can you not do from the windup unless you step off the rubber?
Throw to any base.
Right. You have to go home, correct?
Yes.
So if you're in the windup and the runner from third breaks home to try and steal, and you're Johnny Cueto and you do that little shoulder rock, does it give the runner an advantage or a disadvantage because of the shoulder rock?
Well, it gives him an advantage because
it's taking him longer to deliver the ball.
If your foot's on the rubber, you're going home.
Right. Well, not only that, but once he begins that windup, he can't stop it. He can't stop it. He has to deliver the pitch. So if he rocks his shoulders 2 or 3 times like he did there, at worst, you're throwing off the hitter's timing, which is the job of a pitcher. But if you're Jacoby Ellsbury or Chase Utley or George Springer or Billy Hamilton and you have, Utley doesn't have the same wheels as he used to, but you want to try and steal home, that extra second and a half is free time for you to run because he can't quick pitch at this point. He has to commit to the plate. I don't see why the balk was called. I get maybe they can say that, and Bill Welke is the one that called it. Maybe he can say that, he stopped his motion going home. But we have seen Johnny Cueto do the exact same motion multiple times. It is a consistent thing. He has 3 or 4 different ways that he delivers the ball from the windup. He's got a quick pitch, standard delivery, the rock of the shoulder, and he kind of does Hideo Nomo where he gives him his shoulder, and then there's a straight through pitch. So if it's been a consistent thing, there's no deception because we know he does it. He's just changing which one he's going to do to try and throw off the hitter. There should not have been a balk called. That really bugged me. I'm glad you brought that up.
But in the grand scheme of things, the Giants were able to knock off the Dodgers in 2 out of 3 games, which is really telling, I think, for this National League West race, which is, in my opinion, going to be a race. The Giants the Giants might be 4.5, 5 games ahead now. But coming down the stretch, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. It's June. The Giants get tired in July. They tend to struggle. And they also, for the love of them, tend to struggle in September a little bit. And they've had some really poor Septembers, even in World Series years. And so I definitely think that this is going to be a race to watch going down the stretch.
Didn't they limp into 2010 on the wild card because they started to fall off at the tail end of 2010?
2012. 2012 they actually went in as the second wild card.
That's right.
Played the Pirates in that single game playoff to get into the divisional series, and didn't even have the Giants beat until the 9th inning, or the Pirates beat until the 9th inning.
Yep.
It was a very near thing. Luckily, the bats woke up towards the end of the game, and the rest is the history, as they say. Although that was the series, that was the playoff year that they played both the divisional series and the NLCS in back-to-back fashions where they were in winner-go-home games for at least 2 games.
Yep.
They went down 2-0 to the Reds really quick, came back, won 3 in a row, went down 3-1 to the Cardinals, and came back and won 3 in a row, and then swept the Royals in the World Series. But
so then, they beat the Tigers, I think, in 12.
Tigers,
14 was the. So let me ask you that. So then, what do you think are the keys for both of these teams, really, to continue on the path that they are to at least be, the big matchup that we're hoping for going into the playoffs? And I think one of these teams will likely end up being one of the wild cards. And my hope is that whoever it is comes out, and I'd like to see a 7-game series in the NLDS between these 2 guys.
Right. I think To be honest with you, I think that we've already discussed pitching. Pitching is obviously going to be a key.
Right.
But consistent hitting. The Giants have a real problem. Their bats wake up, and they wake up big, 15, 16 hits in a game. They'll score 8 or 9 runs, and everything looks great. And then the next game, or the next 3 games, they'll have 2, 3 hits, sometimes
look at how Buster struggled opening up the season this year.
Right. He's still
trying to get that back to a normal career average for him.
Right. You saw him give up the goose egg bat that he had been hitting with in Game 1 of that series. Gave it up just before that game-winning single. He just decided he wasn't going to hit with it anymore.
Yep.
In Game 2. I think consistent hitting is a big deal. Bullpen help is going to be a big deal going down the stretch. But I think the thing that's going to really define who goes and who doesn't is going to be, are these big-name guys going to be able to put the bat on the ball when they need to, and are these big-name pitchers going to be able to put outs across the plate when they need to?
Right. I think at least the Dodgers.
To paraphrase the ESPN analysts, the Giants will have to outscore the Dodgers if they hope to beat them in their upcoming series.
That was brilliant analysis. That sounds like NBA stuff right there.
That was definitely paraphrasing an NBA analysis of Warriors staff.
I'm not going to beat on pitching. Peavy and Urias in Game 3 were great. Both were a little bit wild. I noticed in the beginning, Peavy's first couple pitches were off-speed stuff, and his leg kick that we normally see be very wide was a little more subdued, and his command was good. When he got more aggressive with that leg kick, he started throwing usually down and away. Urias tends to miss up, but I think Urias really, with the way we've seen Dodger pitching kind of go up and down, he is going to be the key because he's 0-2 so far, and to be fair, he's played some really, really good teams. He hasn't pitched against a team that kind of allows him to get into a flow. He actually had a pretty good flow against the Giants on that Sunday night game for ESPN. Kenta Maeda took a line drive off the leg. He's expected to be okay, make his next start. Maeda has been doing very well, similar to Ichiro, came out of Japan, so he already has a substantive background. To me, the big thing for the Giants, and like the same for the Dodgers, the Giants have, in my opinion, probably one of the top 2 middle infielders or middle infields in the game. The Cubs likely are probably the best, but I mean between Brandon Crawford and Joe Panic, dude. Around the horn, the Giants are solid.
Brandon Crawford might be the best shortstop in the National League and possibly in Major League Baseball at this point.
I think that's probably pretty fair because Andrelton Simmons, since he got hurt, hasn't been the same in L.A. He was a standout in Atlanta, and Atlanta just got rid of him. Like you said, Posey has to hit. We've got to see Hunter Pence healthy. But real quick, I want to get your thoughts on this, and you brought it up, and I had heard about it right before you mentioned it. But there was a little bit of scuttlebutt going around that potentially the Giants make a move for Ryan Braun from Milwaukee. My initial thought was, Please don't do it, because what we're going to see is steroids paying off. I've lost all respect for him since that whole thing happened. But as a lifelong Giants fan, and also as a baseball analyst at this point for Out of Left Field, and the guys get us at Twitter at @OOLeftField, or you can email us ooleftfield@gmail.com with any thoughts, talking points you want us to get, any questions you have for us. But Chris, what is your thought on the idea of Ryan Braun coming to the Bay Area potentially?
I hate it. I hate the idea of Ryan Braun moving to San Francisco because you're exactly right. We are just rewarding steroid use. and what could potentially. Now, don't get me wrong. Ryan Braun's a good player. He's a great baseball player. But is he a great baseball player because he's a great baseball player, or is he a great baseball player because he's juiced? And we had this problem in 2012. Cabrera comes, just lights up the National League.
From Melky, right?
Yeah, Melky. Lights up the National League, and then after the All-Star break, he pops for steroids.
Yep.
And we neither invited nor wanted to have him back. Now, we did have to give him a ring, though we didn't want to. But now we're inviting another situation where a guy who's been popped for the same thing is going to potentially come to a Giants team that has an opportunity at another ring. And I don't want to see Ryan Braun win a World Series ring based on his actions over the last few seasons.
I agree.
So, yeah, no, I'm against it. I am against it. And I think that their trade situation would be better used looking for guys to put in the bullpen. Okay.
So, and kind of my last thing, and I'm going to go away from the Braun thing. The one thing the Dodgers don't have is outfield production. We've seen Yasiel Puig up and down. Trace Thompson has been, has been pretty decent. Jock Peterson, really, since he came in, had that big tear prior to the All-Star break last year, has plummeted. I am surprised that they haven't optioned him down to AAA because, I mean, his bat, he's hitting similar to B.J. Upton numbers, 220, 230. He has not been consistent. So I think the Dodgers find their way to the one-game wild card. I think it's either going to be the Mets or the Mets, the Cardinals, or the Pirates, which is probably not saying a whole lot on my analysis here. But again, it's early in the season still. I think that the Nationals are going to end up, likely winning that division, which takes us into really the next thing to talk about, which is Nationals and Cubs played a midweek series. And the Nationals took 2 out of 3. Now, granted, this is not going to be the same gumption, same oomph behind it, if you will, because these two teams are not in the same division. Whereas we're looking at, Dodgers and Giants are going to be a divisional race that I think is going to bleed over into the postseason, which is great. The Nats Cubs are really only going to be a setup for hopefully a National League postseason series. The Cubs are going to make the NLCS. Barring anything insane, I mean, I think there's no doubt that they are the World Series favorite still. That they have the pitch and they have the hitting for it. They're consistent. As long as they don't get burnt out, I think that they're clearly going to be NLCS contenders. Only the Nationals don't make it is if the Mets beat them in the division series after the wild card. I say the Nats win the division. Mets are going to be in the wild card unless the NL Central makes a huge push between the Giants or between the Pirates and the Cardinals. And the Pirates-Cardinals is going to really be the race to watch in the Central because those two, I think, are going to end up, going neck and neck for a shot at a wild card spot. I think the Mets end up, if they get left out, I think it changes. It might bring up a change in the way the postseason is seeded, kind of like it did in the NBA. But I think the Nats win. Mets should make the wild card, and if it comes down to the Mets and the Dodgers, that is going to be one heck of a series.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's going to be great. I really like that the Mets are still playing well after losing the World Series last year to the Royals. We've seen the Mets come out of World Series runs and just do terribly in follow-up seasons. And I think the Mets are playing really well. I think that it says a lot about their conviction to go back and win again. But the Cubbies are a force, man.
Yeah.
The Cubbies are really a force. And you can say whatever you want. It's fate. It's their time. It's whatever. I mean, I realize that.
I can tell you what it is right now. 2 words. Theo Epstein is what it is. It's Theo Epstein, man.
I realize that the Ottoman Empire was still in existence the last time the Cubbies won a World Series.
Oh.
But in my opinion, that is not an excuse to grant them a free pass as far as entry into the World Series this year. They're going to have to work for it just like everyone else is going to have to work for it. Mm-hmm. I don't really think that the Nats are going to beat the Giants to go into the NLCS against the Cubs. I really think that the Cubbies' opponent in the NLCS is going to be San Francisco. Let's just look at what the Nats did to the Cubs. They beat them 2 out of 3. They won the series. It was a great series.
Yep.
But I mean, when you have a series where the 2 aces, or 2 of the aces for the Cubs, and Jake Arrieta and John Lester, don't take the mound, then that puts a little bit of a damper on this idea that the Nationals might be world beaters. They didn't face 2 of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball in that series. And had they, it would have been a very, very different series.
I can see that. I mean, Max Scherzer still silenced the Cubs bats. He threw 7 2-hit innings. I mean, he's been a no-hit guy in DC. I mean, he is the ace of that staff, but to me, Strasburg is the linchpin. I mean, like we said last week, his fastball is, high velocity, 100 miles an hour plus. But his devastating pitch is that changeup. And we've seen kind of ebb and flow from him since he had his Tommy John surgery, which I believe was his second, if I recall correctly. I think he had one at San Diego State. And we're finally starting to see him come back into the player that he was. And John Lackey has had a career resurgence. I don't know what has happened. He was decent in Boston, struggled in St. Louis, and then, my gosh, he has just been fantastic. We're seeing him. I think it's similar to what we discussed, I think on our first or second show about, the fact that pitchers tend to gravitate towards teams where there can be multiple solid pitchers, unlike hitters. And I think we're seeing that from him. When he was with Boston, I think it was the tail end of Josh Beckett's tenure there. Buchholz was kind of up and coming. Lester was on the way out and was struggling. And he was looked at as kind of the new big name coming in. Now he's going to a team where, you had Adam Wainwright and Chris Carpenter in St. Louis, but now you're going to a team where, dude, you're not expected to be the ace. I mean, plain and simple, just got to do your job, man. So I think it's huge for him. I think as long as he continues there, that's going to be the thing. And as far as the Nats go, there's a huge drop-off after Scherzer and Strauss. Gio Gonzalez was their pitcher for Game 3. Dude, he had one breakout year in 2012 where I believe that's when he lost the Cy Young Award to R.A. Dickey that year. And it's never been the same for him. I mean, the biggest thing that the Nats have against them is they have enough run support on the team to get the 3, 4, and 5 guys out of most jams.
Right. And I think that that's true. I think that the Nats have more consistent bats than a lot of other teams, not obviously than the Cubs. The Cubs probably have the most consistent hitting roster and pitching roster in the National League. possibly in Major League Baseball.
I think it's the most consistent that we've seen in several seasons.
Yeah. But I just don't. I hesitate at lumping the Nationals in there with a team like the Cubs just because they beat them in a couple of games. Because they didn't face the guys that they're going to face in a division series, a real division series.
True.
Or in an NLCS. They're going to go against area, they're going to go against lesser, and they're not going to hit those guys like they hit, their 4 and 5 guys.
I agree, but this is a little nugget, and I've held on to this stat since I saw it for the right time, and I want you to hear this. I think and I'm not saying that one hitter changes the entire dynamic. I mean, yes, it can, Bryce Harper, but big picture, one hitter doesn't change the entire face of a series, except maybe David Ortiz back in the 2004 World Series and ALCS. But Daniel Murphy came over from the Mets this year, right? And we know that, his bat was hot when he was finishing up the NLCS and the World Series last year. And the Nats didn't want to pay, or the Mets didn't want to pay him. He came to Washington. Last year, in the 2015 postseason, Daniel Murphy hit a home run off of Jake Arrieta, Zach Greinke, and Clayton Kershaw. So hit off of all 3 pitchers. There wasn't a single major league team that had a home run off of all 3 of those pitchers last year.
Yeah.
So,
and it's a big deal, and at the same time, it's not a big deal.
Exactly. It sounds great, but it means nothing in the long run, and I hate that.
It's like, oh man, that's great. And then Madison Bumgarner hits a home run off Clayton Kershaw almost every time he sees him, and he's a pitcher. So, it sounds like, oh, that's a really big deal, but a swing of the bat's a swing of the bat. It happens for some guys, it doesn't happen for others. So, while I love that statistic, it's not enough for me to say, hey, this guy is going to change the outcome of the postseason for this team. And so here's what I want to do, just really quickly, because I know we have more stuff to talk about. I had a great trip to Normandy last week that I want to discuss also. But here's what I want to do real quick. I'm just going to do this real fast, and you give your side, and then we'll move on. So here's how the National League ends as I see it. Okay? I think you're going to have the Giants in the West, the Cubbies in the Central, and you're going to have probably the Nationals in the East. You're going to have the Dodgers and the Mets as wild cards. And I realistically think that coming out of that one-game wild card playoff, you're going to see the Dodgers go into a divisional series against the Giants, and you're going to see the Nats go in against the Cubbies. And I don't think that it's going to come out Dodgers-Nats, and I don't think that it's going to come out Giants-Nats. I think that the Giants and the Cubs are going to go to the NLCS, and from there I can only hope, because winning 2 out of 3, granted the Giants did face their two best pitchers, and won 2 out of 3, but winning 2 out of 3 in the middle in late May, early June, is not like winning 4 out of 7 in October. It's not the same thing. It's not the same atmosphere. It's not even really the same game. Baseball in May is not baseball in October. So from there, I can only make a prediction based on the fact that I want the Giants to go to the World Series. But I think that is probably the likely NLCS matchup.
And again, guys, if you want to send them some grief on that for constantly being the Giants homer, you can do that at OOLeftField on Twitter. You can email us as well, ooleftfield@gmail.com. I'm with you on the division, guys.
If you're going to give me grief, you have to give me grief about not only being a Giants homer, about being a Bay Area homer, because I also like the A's. and I also like the Warriors, and I also like the 49ers. So I was born there. I was raised there. It's what I like.
I'm with you on the division. I think the Nats, the Cubs, and the Giants end up taking it. I'm taking a look at the wild card standings. The Mets are 1 game up on St. Louis. Here is the one I didn't know, and for being in Florida, shame on me. The Marlins are a half game out of the wild card. I didn't know they were playing that strong, especially with Stanton struggling as much as he's been. I believe the Mets make the wild card, without a doubt. It's going to be a race, and I'm sorry, I like the Pirates. I love what Clint Hurdle's done. He's from around here, where I am now. They just don't have that one thing to push them forward. I want to say the Dodgers are going to get in there, but I have seen the St. Louis Cardinals too many times make that late push. So here's what I'm going to say. The Mets to me are the clear number 1 wild card. The Dodgers and the Cardinals are going to fight for number 2. That's going to be the other fantastic series that we're going to get to watch in the National League because, there's just – the problem is both teams are flip-flopped. Right now, the Dodgers pitching is very, very strong, and their hitting's kind of off and on. Justin Turner's been good. Adrian Gonzalez has been good. Middle infield is okay. Their outfield needs some work. Peterson, Puig. Puig is so hot and cold, and he's so emotional it affects his play. The Cardinals, their bats have been decent. Their starting pitching really has struggled. The biggest thing, though, is while the Dodgers have a ton of money, we see the Cardinals make those small little tweaks, those little moves that usually give them that edge. So I reserve to say who is going to be my number 2 wild card team until the trade deadline ends because I want to see who they're going to add. Clearly, injuries will take a toll, but I'm on record saying Nats, Cubs, Giants in the division, Mets as a number 1 wild card, and then a Dodgers, Cardinals are going to be my number 2 wild card, no doubt.
Now, I'd like to say this, and I don't know if this is going to affect what you think or not. The Dodgers also have a tendency to make late-stage pushes. So take this with a grain of salt. But the Dodgers have 2 more losses than the Cardinals, 1 more win, 3 more losses than the Mets, and 1 less win. Oh, I'm sorry, they're tied for wins. The Mets are at a win percentage of .545. The Dodgers are at .522. The Cardinals are at .530. So yeah. I think when you say that the race for that second wild card slot is going to be a lot of fun to watch between the Cardinals and the Dodgers, that rings with a lot of truth right now. The Dodgers are 6.5 games out of first. The Cards are 10.5 games out of first because the Cubbies are just destroying
and that's
everything
the hardest
that
part
they come in contact with.
Yeah, that's the hardest part is the Cubs are running away with that Central. So, really that Central race comes down to, unfortunately, it's all about the wild card because you're not, playing for second means nothing.
Right.
If the Dodgers, and this stinks because I think the Mets are great, if the Dodgers make it into the wild card, and it depends, Kershaw should be pitching. I think it's obviously going to depend on how close that race stays. To me, this is Kershaw's year. His numbers are otherworldly. I think Kershaw beats the Mets, and I think it's Kershaw beats the Mets.
I agree.
We don't see the pop out of their bats right now in LA. It's going to have to be on his arm. If that's the case, then we're going to see We're going to see we should see the Cubs play the Dodgers because that'll be number 1 to number 4 seed, and we'll see the Nats play the Giants. I give the edge there to San Francisco just because
we're ostensibly going to see the Cubs play the Dodgers. Now, keep in mind that the Cubs have played a few games fewer than the Giants at this point, but the Giants only have 3 fewer wins. So, I mean, both of those teams are sitting right now in you got the Cubs are the number 1 team in the National League right now. The Nationals are number 2 at 43 and 25, and then the Giants 43 and 26. Now the Cubbies are at 45 and 20.
Yeah.
But so they played 4 fewer games.
Yeah.
I just think that
let me say, with the ebb and flow, I still have a hard time not seeing the Cubs being the number 1 team. I think we're going to see an addition to their bullpen. I've heard rumor about either Andrew Miller or Aroldis Chapman from the Yankees. Andrew Miller has had a career year, but this is not his normal career. I think you see Aroldis Chapman potentially go to Chicago from New York if the Yankees sell, which I think they will. And I think you bolster that pen with Chapman. And I think that's really going to kind of get them over that hump. There's been talk about how many young guys would the Cubs garner trades for. I've heard Kyle Schwarber's name get tossed around. I still think that they end up being the top seed, which basically keeps my picks the same. So you see the Cubs against the Dodgers. I don't think at that point that the Dodgers come out of the division.
No.
I still have to give to me, Jeff Samardzija, needs to continue to pitch well, and I think you can kind of, I don't want to say hide him, but I think he will. He is showing well in San Francisco. I think it ends up being a Cubs Giants NLCS, and that thing is going 7, and it's going to come down to the last game. That's just what I see. I really hope it does.
I agree. But I think we've beat the National League into the ground a little bit today. Next week we have to focus on the American League, and we'll make picks for that too, early picks.
Which, by the way, focusing on the American League, Chris, does not mean which players should the Giants pick up for a postseason run. Just going to go ahead and lay the foundation for that one now, okay? Again, guys, at OOLeftField on Twitter, OOLeftField@gmail.com if you want to get in contact with us that way. For those of you that haven't been tuning in, this is your first time with us, Chris lives in Arizona right now, is on I think a 4 or 5 week European trip for school. He is currently in Rome, Italy, had lunch across from the Colosseum today. He sent me some really cool pictures, which is pretty neat to see. But I know that you were in France last week, which I believe was just a day or two after the anniversary of the D-Day invasion on Omaha Beach. And you told me that you had a chance to go down there and see, and I'd love if you could kind of just share with us a little bit of what you had a chance to see while you were down there.
Yeah, I got to Omaha Beach on the 12th of June, 6 days after the anniversary of the D-Day invasion, and I was able to go into the Omaha Beach Museum, where they have hour-by-hour reconstructions of what was going on the beach, what happened. They have a film at the end of the tour where they interview men who were on the beach that day which is a powerful thing to watch, and a woman who was on the beach that day, which is a powerful thing to watch. She was a nurse on a plane that was flying out casualties, and she was there that day. And it's crazy thing to think of, but yes, men and women both died on Omaha Beach. And I had the opportunity to walk on the beach and look back up at the hills and realize that what you see in the movies is hard because it doesn't give you a perspective. It's a long way across the beach to the beachhead. And it was a long road to hoe to establish that beachhead. Go ahead. You were saying something?
I know we don't, I'm not bringing up the whole idea of ghosts, but, obviously, with us both being in the military, there's a sense of pride and honor, and you can kind of always, in certain things, you kind of feel those who've gone before you. Did that, I'm sure it translated, but did you get that sense, or I guess better, what was that sense like standing on the beach, looking up, and because I know at that point, kind of like me, my first thought went tactically of, God, the idea of these guys getting off of these landing crafts and having to trample through water before they hit sand, looking, as you said, uphill and realizing, you've got no ground. You're just wide open. So,
yeah.
What was it like?
And absolutely no cover.
Look? Yeah.
It's pretty awe-inspiring, to be honest with you. It's a little difficult sometimes. It was a little difficult at moments. Also, in keeping with my European tour, I ate at a small cafe on the beach where I could see the beach from the front of the cafe, and it was strange to be sitting there eating chicken Normandy and drinking French wine and eating French cheese and looking at a place where 70 some odd years ago men were dying just to get onto the shore.
Right. It kind of odd feeling of doing something so peaceful in a place that was wrought by such pain and suffering and violence so many years ago.
Right. It's an odd juxtaposition to be part of. And nowhere in all of that area does it really strike you so much as at the American Cemetery. There is an American cemetery that overlooks Omaha Beach. Over 9,000 American service members are buried there. And when you walk into the cemetery, there's a visitor center. Beautiful. Granite construction, 2 levels with glass looking out over onto the beach. There's an infinity pool similar to what they have in Washington, D.C. in front of the Washington Monument. But this goes out from a higher level. The cemetery is up on the bluffs. So this infinity pool goes out from that visitor center and seems to just go out into the ocean. It's a really incredible place. And then you walk through this huge monument that has some memorials to not only the Americans who died there, but also the British and the Canadians who were involved in that invasion on those 5 beaches. And you see, as you walk through that monument, you get to the front of it, and there in front of you, you see the crosses, those white marble crosses just laid out in perfect rows. Not all of them are crosses, obviously. There are intermittent stars of David as well, but laid out in near perfect rows for acres. It's a very powerful scene. It's a very powerful thing to see. And walking among them, you read the names, you read the dates, the ranks, and those are striking as well. But I'll tell you what struck me the most. Sort of interspersed in that cemetery are several crosses, which is obviously the default grave marker. But there are several crosses that bear an inscription that say, "Here lies a brother in arms, known but to God," which means that was an unknown American who died on the beach, that they didn't have the means to identify. And there are several of those in the graveyard there. And it's striking to me that that there are so many of those interspersed in that graveyard. But it's a powerful thing to experience firsthand.
I can imagine. I mean, I've had a chance to visit D.C. a couple of times and see Arlington and pay my respects there. But it's different where Arlington is. Many people are laid to rest. It's not also the place where something like that was fought, and then for many the place where they paid the ultimate sacrifice is not a place where they're laid to rest.
In foreign soil.
Exactly. And it's. I kind of told you, what I wanted to say off of that, and I think that with the way that you've kind of described what you've seen, not that it's changed my perspective, but it's not nearly going to be as in depth. I know that you're a baseball history guy. I am to a point. I don't know as much about the history, but more than 500 Major League Baseball players and managers, some big names, some not, served during World War II, and some of them in the middle of their playing years. There are 64 United States military veterans enshrined in Cooperstown, New York, as Major League Baseball Hall of Famers. And there actually were 2 players that were killed in action during the war. 2 names that no one knows: Elmer Gideon, Harry O'Neill. O'Neill was a catcher, played in 1 game in July 23rd, 1939, which, when I read that, playing 1 game, replaced the starting catcher for a 16-3 loss, caught 2 innings, never had an at-bat. And oddly enough, and some may find this funny, but it made me immediately think of Moonlight Graham from Field of Dreams,
right.
And just kind of the idea of, he was really a no-name, but the impact when you finally hear what the story was. Gideon had 17 plate appearances with the Washington Senators in 1939. Reached base a handful of times, 3 times, or had 3 singles, scored a run, had an RBI. O'Neill, and this one was O'Neill was commissioned as a lieutenant, and he was wounded by shrapnel in his shoulder. Both were injured prior to the injuries that caused their death. So they were injured and then returned to service. 11 days after the flag was raised on Mount Suribachi, O'Neill was standing next to a soldier. Sniper shot rang out, hit him in his throat, severed his spinal cord, and he died right there. Elmer Gideon was on one of the air crews, survived a plane crash in a training exercise in New York, where he suffered severe burns trying to crawl back in and rescue one of his crewmates. He was the only survivor. Had to have multiple skin grafts, actually, for the burns he received. And when the Allies were attempting to bomb Germany after the London attacks, his B-26 was shot down after anti-aircraft fire ripped through it, and that was when when he passed away. I'm going to throw out about 6 names here for you real quick, Battle, just to kind of, some people that fought that some you may know, some you may not know. I think the most famous is probably Ted Williams. He was a Navy pilot from 42 to 46, and then actually went back into the Marine Corps from 52 to 53. That was for Korea. I didn't know this. Jackie Robinson was commissioned as a second lieutenant after graduating UCLA in 1942.
Right.
And served before.
Right. Jackie Robinson was commissioned as lieutenant and was not dishonorably discharged, but was removed from service after some pretty severe incidents that he had with other service members, actually. He didn't like the idea of having to sit in the back of a bus on an army base, which is understandable. He's wearing the same uniform. Why should he have to sit in a reserved area for people of color?
Right.
So he had some issues when he was in. He did serve. And, of course, Ted Williams, Ted Williams didn't just serve once. He went back and served again. But enough baseball players left and fought in World War II that it actually disrupted baseball. For the first time ever, they skipped the World Series. Ever. And then we have the rise of the Women's Baseball League.
Yeah, no, see, I didn't actually know that the World Series had been skipped. That's news to me. I didn't know that.
Yes, they missed the World Series. It was the only one they ever missed, and they were adamant that they would never miss another, which is where the Women's Baseball League came in. Women's baseball was introduced as not an alternative to men's baseball, but as a substitute for men's baseball.
Right.
And that's where you get Tom Hanks' movie, League of Their Own.
Yeah, thank you. Wow.
And which, if you can get around some of the less stellar acting from Rosie O'Donnell and Madonna. Although Madonna's character is actually sort of endearing. But if you can get around some of the less stellar acting, Tom Hanks puts in a great performance in that film. And it's actually a really great baseball movie. But baseball was interrupted. So.
And I got 4 more names, and then I'll let you. I know you probably getting back to the nightlife there. So let me just read these off real quick, and then we'll close out the show. A name I didn't know: Hank Greenberg, a 5-time All-Star, was one of the anchors for the Detroit Tigers infield. He volunteered in the Air Force. These last 3 are the ones that really struck me. Jolton Joe DiMaggio, served in the Air Force from 43 to 46. Stan the Man Musial left baseball in the middle of his career, missing the entire 1945 season to join the Navy. But here's the biggest that really caught me. Warren Spahn, one of the best pitchers in baseball history, enlisted in the U.S. Army, fought in the Battle of the Bulge, and during his time of service received a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. Yeah.
I mean, they call the men that served during World War II, they call them the greatest generation.
Yep.
These are men who, whether drafted or volunteers, left everything that they knew, and they didn't have the 12-month deployments or the 12-month deployment cycles that my generation was was put through.
Right.
These guys left in 1942 to the Pacific as Marines, or they left in 1944 to Europe as members of the Army or Army Air Corps, and they stayed until the job was done. I mean, they went for sometimes 2 and 3 years, and they stayed there until they finished that war.
Yep, and oftentimes guys would be promoted just because of the loss of one. And for those of you that haven't seen Band of Brothers, you'll notice that Dick Winters, who is the main character, it basically starts off as just a private training in an airborne unit and ends up being a major because of his leadership abilities, and also
he's a lieutenant.
Right,
he's a lieutenant.
Yeah, and at
the
end,
very beginning, he's a second lieutenant when the movie starts.
Okay.
He gets his captain bars, and then takes over the unit.
Okay. So yeah, guys, it's a movie I recommend. Well, it's a more of a mini series, but not to end obviously not to end the show on that dark of a note, but just a reminder. It is Father's Day coming up. So for those of you that have fathers, grandfathers that served and are still around, if you see someone, say thank you.
Sorry. I thought you were just going to say for those of you who have fathers, enjoy Father's Day. And I was going to say that's really messed up because there are people who don't.
If I had...
You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
If I had a cricket sound effect right now, I would do that, and maybe we can just get this part edited out, because come on, Battle, really, that was... Guys, we appreciate you all listening to us, even when weird things like that happen. I feel like we just broke character in the end of Saturday Night Live. Again, please tell your friends about it, have them listen to us. You're always welcome to tweet us and try and get a hold of us. We want to respond to you. We want to be interactive with you guys. At OOLeftField on Twitter. You can email us ooleftfield@gmail.com. Battle, I appreciate you, again, jumping in. I know this is, we're going all the way into Italy now, and you're back in, you said Germany next week, isn't it?
No, I'll be in D.C. next week, actually.
Okay, so you're heading back. Okay.
And then I'll be in Berlin the following week.
Okay.
So.
Well, we will. I'm going to let you go and go do whatever crazy amounts of things that you're going to do while you're in Rome, because when in Rome, dinner. There you go. It's not a bad idea. It's, I know you're getting right about 9 o'clock there. So, guys, again, thank you for joining us. Thanks for being here with us. What's that, B?
Yeah. Sounds good, man.
All right, guys. Well, this has, again, been Out of Left Field. We appreciate you guys joining in. Chris coming all the way from Italy. And we will see you guys next week. Again, we will have plenty more things coming to you guys straight out of left field.